Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How's it going?
Hey.
Going good. How is everybody?
Good. How's everyone else?
I'm doing
Pretty
well.
good.
Jeremy, how's your 3 deals still going? Everything set up for them?
Yes.
Awesome, man. That's
Closed
good.
September 29th.
That's great. I'm still waiting for my background check to come back from the state. I sent it in on August 4th, so they said 30 days, so I'm hoping it'll be here by then.
On the background check, you may just check with Arkansas Real Estate Association, because I don't believe I got anything in the mail saying there was anything wrong, or they just said I was cleared.
Yeah, that's I called them today, and they said it just hasn't come back from the state yet. They said it usually takes 30 days. The lady there said that they sent 400 background checks to the state police headquarters in the month of July, and 300 in July and 400 in August. They just said they're backed up.
That is very common with everything right now.
Mm-hmm.
Have any of you guys worked with PySync to bring your contacts over from Gmail? My contacts wouldn't come over with the KW dashboard that they give you, but I used PySync and it worked on 106 of them, but it wouldn't work on the other 600. So I'm having to figure out. I think I know where the problem is. I went from a Samsung phone to a Pixel phone, and it's saying restored from Samsung, and all of those didn't come over. So I think that's what the problem is. Frustrating.
Do we think Jody forgot about this?
I don't know how. I mean, we've gotten messages from the market center, messages from Marcella, reminders from Mike this morning, I think.
Yeah, and I didn't know this was going on today. This is the first I've heard it when I got Marcella's email, and I was like, oh, I've got one to. I'll have had one every day this week.
Yeah, last week he was supposed to have the contracts training last Wednesday, and that ended up canceling. So who knows?
Hmm. Well, are you all of you, I believe, are in my PC coaching class, correct? Am I lying?
Hey, you
I
guys,
am.
this is Erin. I'm pretty sure that this is the wrong Zoom number. I'm looking at the email that I got from the market center today.
Uh-huh.
Stand by just a second. I'm going to put the Zoom number that's showing on there in the chat.
Perfect.
I don't see it.
Hey guys, this is Keithan. I think Jody's going to join here in a minute.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because we're
so
all at the wrong place.
he lost the wrong one, so he's on his way.
Jennifer, I've not come and bothered you today.
Yeah, no. Sure.
I figure you're probably saying, oh, thank goodness, my goodness, he's not going to come in today. Holy crap, he's such a pain in my butt.
Wait, let's see.
I live about a half a block from the Johnson Market Center. So anytime I have a problem, I go in there and I say, hey, help, please.
Yeah.
And Jennifer has been great every time. Surprisingly enough, she's not saying, oh, and running the other way whenever I walk through the door.
No, I love it. I love it.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing today?
Great.
I'm pretty good, Jody.
Great.
Pretty good.
Great.
I'm going to assume that all the answers are in the affirmative if I don't hear anything, because I know everybody's got to scramble for their mute button. I miss the old days when you could be in a classroom and you could say, how's everybody doing? And everybody would grumble. And then you had, hey, I can't hear you. Yeah, thanks, Teddy. I see the thumbs up. I like that. All right, guys, I apologize. We had a couple of different numbers out there, and Jennifer and I were having our own meeting. Keithan, thanks for calling me and letting me know that everybody was hiding out in a different room, so I appreciate that. So for those of you who have been on these calls before, you may see some redundancy here, but I'm gonna change the format of the way we do this a little bit. And you know, my goal has always been to provide a platform. What's the best basis of knowledge that you can have to help you in a transaction, to help you understand the processes and stuff like that. And you know, one of the things that we've done is we've picked out different pieces of the contract or different documents within a contract, and we've looked at that document and everything else. And while I feel like that's good, it doesn't give you a kind of a the experience and how those documents relate to the experience. So what I thought we're going to do is we're going to break this contract training into 4 parts. Today will be part 1, but the 4 parts are kind of looking at a transaction through the eyes of a buyer and through the buying process. And then we'll look at the contract process through the selling, you know, the listing process from a seller standpoint. How do those differ? And they differ greatly. They really do. So think of it not only as contract training, but procedural training as well. And then the 3rd session will be more. We'll pick a few documents and get a little bit deeper into those documents. And I'm working on that list currently. And then the last session, the 4th session, will be kind of, you know, my top 10 deal, which is the top 10 mistakes that can be made, the top 10 areas of exposure that you have for your clients. And we're going to cover those anecdotally in the procedures, but I think it's very helpful to have those top 10 grouped together, because we're doing that in real time. And the issues that I face every day, the issues that Valerie Waldrop faces every day, and the issues that Cameron Legrone faces every day, and the issues that all of our brokers see every day, is they're going to kind of change that list. So it's going to be a work in progress. But what you're going to see in that class is going to be, you know, what are we facing daily that's causing us problems? That's, you know, getting us into lawsuits, that, you know, has agents thinking that, you know, we're not doing our job and that kind of thing. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. and start. Today is what we call the buyer C2C, which is, a lot of people think of C2C as contract to close, but we're going to call it the consult to close. Okay. And I want to encourage you guys to jump in and ask questions as we go, because I'm gonna move somewhat quickly through this. So if you have a question, please let me know, or if you have something you want to add. This is kind of the first time I've used this format, so I know that there's things that are going to be missed, so I'm going to be adding to my agenda as we go. I could use your help. Frankly, even if some of you have only done 1 or 2 transactions, you may have experienced something that that's not on my list. So please speak up. And again, if you have questions, let me know. So what's step 1 of the buyer consult to close? Anybody want to throw a word out there?
Buyer's agreement.
I love. Who said that? Oh,
Babette.
I couldn't see it because I'd switched over to my agenda, but yeah, no, I love the way you're thinking, but I meant that kind of as a little bit of a joke because
Sorry.
no, that's no, I meant I do like it, but the question was a little bit of a joke because if it's buyer consult to close, the buyer consult, that your initial consult is step number 1. So the buyer consult can certainly include the buyer's agency agreement, and I'll get into that in a second. But your buyer consult is when, in a perfect world, now it's not always going to happen. Your initial buyer consult may be while you're waiting on a table at freaking PF Chang's. You may be sitting there and someone else is sitting there, and believe me, if you're not getting clients out there in a social environment, you're short selling yourself, because that is where a lot of people get their clients. It's client procurement. You never know when you're going to run into someone that's going to be your next commission check. So you're sitting in the line at PF Chang's and you're talking about what dish you're going to have. And this person says, yeah, well, God, we're just worn out today. We've been driving around looking at neighborhoods. Bam. Hey, well, I'm an agent. My name's Babette. And I'm an agent with Keller Williams Real Estate. Who are you working with? Anybody? And that actually could be your initial buyer consult. But typically, your initial buyer consult would be more formal than that. And it might look something like this. You talk to this person at PF Chang, you hand them your business card, you get their number, and say, look, what I'd love to do is I'd love to set up an initial buyer consult with you and find out maybe if we could work together, if it's a good fit. And, in doing that, you set an appointment and you establish your buyer consult. And there's a couple things that in your buyer consult that you should do. Of course, buyer agency agreement is one of them. But basically in that initial buyer consultation, you want to set expectations. Let that person know what the buying process looks like. And if the more experienced you get, the harder your initial buyer consult is going to be. And the reason is because of your experience level. You're going to be so experienced with the lending process and the contract to close process and writing an offer and getting pre-qualified and everything else that you're going to be so familiar with that you're going to feel like everybody else knows that too. But I can tell you for a fact that most initial buyer consultations, if you're doing a formal initial buyer consultation, you have to start with the idea that your buyer knows nothing. And this is just such a great opportunity for you to make a first impression. And when I'm talking about setting expectations, hey, these are all the things that could go wrong. This is what the timeline looks like. It could be, anything and everything, but you're basically explaining the process and the flow of what it's like to be a buyer. So, the other thing that I would make sure that you explain in your initial buyer consultation would be agency. Okay. And that doesn't mean just filling out an agency agreement. That means, has anyone been burned by a buyer client where you had a buyer, you thought you had a buyer, and they bought from somebody else. Anybody had that happen yet?
Yes, in car sales.
Okay. Yeah. And car sales, it's I was in the automobile business, and we call it skating a customer. You know, if someone would come in there and they would skate your customer away from you, you know. But yeah, and it happens in this business too. Now, I will tell you that there are some agents out there that will skate you, that will try to skate you, but it's the exception rather than the rule. Most of the folks out here are going to respect an agency relationship, especially if you have it in writing. But this is your opportunity to explain the agency relationship. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I have fiduciary duty as your agent to represent you at the highest level that I possibly can, regardless of compensation. As long as I'm your agent and you're my client, that's my fiduciary duty, and I want to uphold that. Now, I expect you to honor that too. And what that means is as your agent, I need to be your first point of contact anytime you find anything that you're interested in. I'm going to make myself available to you. So if you see a for sale by owner, or if you see a house that has a blue sign or a yellow sign in front of it instead of a red sign, you don't call the agent. You call me. I am your agent, and I can get you information on any house that's listed. I can provide you information for houses that aren't listed. I negotiate for sale by owners. Anything and everything. Make sure that you educate them and you set those expectations that they are your client, and that more importantly, you are their agent. Believe me, I think if you make that an integral part of your initial buyer consultation, you will save yourself potentially a lot of headaches, but you'll definitely save yourself, you know, 1 or 2 headaches throughout your career, depending on how many transactions you do. Because believe me, we've all been burned by the buyer who walks on the car lot and buys the car from someone else because they had no idea what an agency relationship is. And our agency relationship is very deep. In fact, it's in writing. We have a fiduciary. There are lots of businesses out there where there are a kind of salesperson and a client, and there is no fiduciary. There is no written relationship. Here,
Isn't it? Excuse me, sorry. But isn't it also that if they're a buyer, if they don't sign a agency agreement with you, that you actually have to support the seller in this by Arkansas law? Is that the way I understood it as well?
No, it depends on if it's our listing or if it's someone else's listing. You know, there's a little bit difference between a client and a customer. You know, they talk about the difference between a client and a customer and everything else. But you can have implied agency, and you can also have, there's this pesky little thing called procuring cause. Maybe some of you guys have heard of that. But I will tell you that there is no substitute. And Babette, you know, you hit the nail on the head. You know, what's the first thing you do when you get a buyer? You get a buyer's agency agreement. I particularly don't necessarily do that, but I think it's absolutely imperative, because what it does is it gives you the opportunity to explain the agency relationship, and it establishes credibility because you've got something in paper from the state of Arkansas, and it is going to lock your client to you. Okay. It's going to absolutely, that client is held by an exclusive buyer's agency agreement, not by a non-exclusive, but by an exclusive, that they have to work with you. And in order to get out of it, they may have to pay a fee, or they may have to write a letter to the broker, or whatever the case may be. But I will tell you that if you get a buyer's agency agreement, the chances of you losing that buyer are diminished greatly. I mean, they're so greatly diminished. The other thing too is if you know, and I don't have this happen near as often, because I think we're getting really, really good at asking for buyer's agency agreements, is I have agents that call me and say, hey, you know, I had this buyer, and you know, somebody over at XYZ, they stole them from me. And I'm like, okay, who knows? Babette, I'm not going to let you answer this one, but who knows? What's the first question I asked that agent when they said my buyer got stolen from me?
Did you have a buyer's agreement?
Of course. Yeah. Did you have a buyer's agreement? Well, no, but I showed these people houses. It doesn't matter, guys. It doesn't matter. You know, it's the only way that you can make the argument that these folks are your clients is with a buyer's agency agreement. Now, while we're on that, let's talk about procuring costs for just a second. So let's say that you have a buyer, and that buyer says, I am interested in looking at 3-bedroom, 2-bath houses with a 3-car garage in, you know, West Bentonville. And you go, you know what? I've got the perfect house for you. It just came up on the MLS. I'm going to drive you over there and we're going to go take a look at that. You know, so you drive them over there. You're sitting out in front of it and you take a look at it and they're like, wow, I really like this house. But I tell you what, before we go look at it, let me get my wife and, you know, we'll look at it tomorrow. So you're all excited. You're going to make a showing appointment and everything else. And then you call them. They won't call you back. You won't call them. You see that house goes pending. And then later you find out that they called the listing agent and the listing agent wrote a contract on that house. Now, from a procuring cost standpoint, you would have a case there. However, it's almost impossible to prove. Okay. So please, please, please don't rely on procuring cause as your fail safe for establishing a buyer relationship. Get your buyer's agency agreement. I've never seen a situation where someone's not willing to sign a buyer's agency agreement, especially if, you know, if you're a good agent. I've seen bad agents get buyer's agency agreements with absolutely no problem because they simply ask for one. And there are, does anybody know Drew Taylor that's on this call? I'll ask that anecdotally, you don't have to answer. Drew Taylor, at one point, he has the distinct recognition of being one of the top buyer's agents for Keller Williams in the country. This guy routinely sells over 100 homes a year as strictly a buyer's agent. Here, he's out of the Fayetteville office. He's also a MAPS coach. But anyway, he's an absolutely fantastic buyer's agent. That guy will not show houses without a buyer's agency agreement. He won't even get in the car with someone, you know, because they have such a steadfast way of doing their business. That's just part of it. So don't be afraid of a buyer's agency agreement. Make sure that you get that when you do your initial buyer's consultation. Okay, let's take a real quick look at our buyer's agency agreement. So right now we're going to use the exclusive buyer's agency agreement. Everybody see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. So first of all, let me tell you, there's really kind of two differences between an exclusive buyer's agency agreement and a non-exclusive. One of the biggest ones is right here, selling firm's fee. Okay. In a exclusive buyer's agency agreement, you actually have to put a fee in here. So you'd have to put in, okay, I'm gonna charge my buyer 3%, and that's the way that should look in a properly executed exclusive buyer's agency agreement. And you might even charge a $175 fee for a broker service fee or something like that, whatever the case may be. Now it says up here, your buyer may push back on there because it says buyer is obliged to pay the selling firm's fee. Well, what if you sell a house and you don't get 3%? Because it says up here, selling firm is authorized to accept partial. Someone have a question?
Oh, sorry, I was yelling at my kid.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, it happens. My dog may go crazy here in a minute, so you'll have to bear with me. But it says that we're allowed, authorized to accept partial or complete payment of the selling firm's fee from the selling firm or listing firm. And guys, that happens about 99% of the time, okay? So it's fine to put 3 here and only accept 2.7. What I have seen is when people fill this out, we'll start at the top here real quick and just kind of go through this. Right to represent, okay, this is where you put Keller Williams, and I know that should be capitalized, so Keller Williams Market Pro is going to represent John Q. Buyer. So that's who is representing who property. And what I would put here is I see people put this. Guys, that's not going to hold up. you need to be a little bit specific, okay? Single family home matching buyer criteria in NWA. So, just something like that. If it's commercial, say it's commercial. If it's single family, say it's single family. And what you're trying to do there is you're not trying to limit yourself, but the thing is if you put any property in Northwest Arkansas, AREC may not uphold that, because what they do allow is they do allow a client to work with, different agents across different, types of properties. And whereas you may have exclusive buyer's agency agreement for a person, and you put any, they could potentially have, another buyer's agent working for them in Little Rock looking for investment properties. And by putting any, you would be creating a conflict there. So just, put something general here. Don't put any, just put something single family home or multifamily investment property, or you can put both. You could put single family home and or a multifamily if in fact you're representing that client looking for two items. Duration of agency, 6 months to a year is about all you want to do here. Again, that's not my policy. That's what the AREC, that's what they will uphold. Generally speaking, I would put 3% here if you're using an exclusive. On a non-exclusive, there's an opportunity to check a box that just says selling agent will accept whatever listing agent is providing. So that kind of negates having this ambiguity here. But I would put 3%. If you are going to collect a fee from your buyer in addition to the commission, you'd put that here. And typically what you want to do is you want to put in here, selling firm may represent both buyer and seller, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a dual agent. It's your listing and your buyer. What that means is you can sell that buyer a Keller Williams listing, okay? Does anybody know where Keller Williams stacks up in Northwest Arkansas as far as brokerages? We are number one. And here's the thing, guys. We're number one. We've been number one for 4 years. We're going to be number one this year. That makes 5 in a row. And we're widening the gap, okay? We're number one. We carry more listings than anyone. If your buyer doesn't allow you to be a dual agent, theoretically, you can't sell a Keller Williams listing. So you need to explain that to them. Hey, I'm happy to, work on it if I'm the listing agent of a particular listing, but we don't want to limit this to only listings that aren't Keller Williams, because you're going to take out approximately 13% of the listings because we have about 13% market share. So make sure you explain that properly, and that'll help kind of get through that piece of it. Expired agency conditions, typically right here, you want to do 30 days. Okay. Again, this is AREC is not going to uphold that. If you try to say, okay, I'm going to hold them for a year as a buyer's agency, and I'm going to put in 6 months. So 6 months after my buyer's agency agreement ends, if they go out and purchase something, I still entitled to the commission. That will not hold up. Okay. You need to do a 30-day there. And what this is if you're dealing with a shifty buyer and you are working on selling a for sale by owner, and you have your buyer's agency agreement intact, and you guys talk to this for sale by owner person or whatever, and then your buyer goes behind your back and tries to say, hey, look, my buyer agency agreement expires in 3 days. Why don't I just buy it from you direct? And, hey, we'll get it cheaper. There's always this impression that houses get bought cheaper if agents aren't involved, and that's an absolute fallacy. But on this one, you want to put 30 days in there. And what that does is it protects you from situations like that if a buyer did try to circumvent your fee. Cancellation, I've got mixed emotions on this, but I would put in there some type of cancellation, guys. Now, the thing is you don't have to hold them to it. If you put $1,000 cancellation in there, I would never force you to collect that if you and your buyer had a disagreement and you guys didn't want to continue forward. Nor would any broker in our firm. We want to work together. If they don't want to work together, we don't want to do a cancellation. But what you can do is you can put $1,000 fee in here, or a $500 fee, or whatever the case you want to do. And that way, if you do end up driving them around and they're like, I don't want to work with you anymore. My sister just got her license and I want to work with her. You know what? Fantastic. But I'm going to have to be compensated for the time that I've spent. So I'm going to have to ask you to pay that cancellation fee. Honestly, if it's a situation like that, most people will do it. Occasionally you're going to have someone that's a little shifty, perhaps, and they may try to get around that. But I might put that in there. You could always take it out, but it will help enforce your buyer's agency agreement. See what else we got here. Yeah.
Whenever we're talking about our contracts and stuff, I know that, I did finance in the car dealerships for 14 years.
Yeah.
One of the things that was always on our mind was if we treated one customer differently, or the contracts weren't all the same, is there a possibility of getting a discrimination lawsuit against you for that?
Man, you are way out in front. Yeah, there potentially could be. So I think what you have to do is you have to be consistent with whatever you decide to do. And the thing is you could you could write in $1,000 fee for everyone, and then at some point you might change your mind and no longer offer a fee. And lo and behold, that person that says, well, hey, you were charging fees, and then the next very person, you didn't charge them a fee, so were you discriminating against me or whatever? Someone could make that argument. You could say, well, I just decided to stop charging it, and you were the last person that I put it on their contract. So there can always be an argument made for discrimination, absolutely. But I think the thing is this is a fluid business, and decisions that we make are fluid, and you've got to be prepared to defend your decision, why you did what you did. Why did you put it on one person's contract, but you didn't put it on another? If your intent is pure and you've got reasons to back it up, you're never really going to be on the wrong side of a lawsuit, unless you are negligent or you make a mistake, which we want to keep that to a minimum. That's why we're all here. But good point. But yeah, I think honestly, you always want to be consistent in everything you do. Consistency is the key to greatness. It really is, and practicing good habits. So great point. Hopefully we don't ever have to deal with that. Special conditions. A typical special condition could be, am I on share screen? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, you're good.
So a typical special condition would be, buyer, has the right to purchase 1, 2, 3 Main without, broker representation, something like that. That would be a special condition, because what can happen is you're representing this buyer, and the buyer says, well, hey, Teddy, I'm looking forward to doing business with you. However, I did talk to my neighbor a little bit about it. And, we talked about me possibly buying his house, which is still an option. So, I don't necessarily know if I want to drag you into that, or whatever. That might be a special condition. There's all kinds of stuff that can come up, but that's probably the most common legitimate special condition for a buyer's agency agreement. So, as always, if you have questions about any of this stuff, I'm as close as a text message or a phone call, generally speaking.
Excuse me for a minute, Jody.
Yeah.
When I do that special condition, I usually put an end date, because what if you started showing these people houses for a year, and then they didn't buy that neighbor's house, and then a year later they did buy that neighbor's house? I know year's a long time, but if I didn't have an end date and I've been showing them houses all that time, I kind of been, I guess, wasting my time.
No, I get your point.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a great, that's really one of the things that makes a great agent versus a good agent is a great agent can anticipate things. And that may sound silly or whatever, but I will tell you that experience gives you the ability to anticipate things, you know, and there's no substitute for that. And you're anticipating, you know, things that could happen. And I think that's awesome. You could absolutely have an end date. You've got 45 days to put that house under contract. If you don't, then I'm going to enforce my cancellation fee, or I'm going to enforce a buyer's agency agreement on that particular property. You can absolutely do that. That's a great point. So as far as the filling in of the blanks, that's pretty much it. So you've got your, your execution date. Your execution date is probably going to be your initial buyer consultation. It should never be after you've written a contract. Okay. Anytime that you have a client and you have not yet, and I do this all the time, guys. I rarely ever get a buyer's agency agreement prior to a contract. The reason being is I am 100% by repeat and referral. My clients come to me. They're going to work with me. But that doesn't mean I haven't been burned before. I have been, but typically I explain to them agency relationship and everything, and I just defer getting an actual written agreement until I write the contract. But you better get that buyer's agency agreement signed at the same time you execute the contract. Worst case scenario, it should be done before that. And if you or anyone you know has a story, they come up a situation where their buyer got stolen from them and they need to call their broker, the very first question I'm going to ask is, do you have a buyer's agency agreement? So it's just protection, guys. It's how you get paid representing a buyer. So explain that document, explain what agency means, and get it done. I can go through the document, but I will tell you there's no substitute for just reading it. I read this stuff occasionally. Anytime I have an issue comes up, the very first thing I do is go back to the contract. And, when someone says, well, hey, I've got this inspection, repair, and survey in, and this and that happened, and this, and the first thing I do is go back and reread it to make sure that I'm 100% clear on what the timelines are, what agency means, and, and everything else, just so that I'm operating from my operation foundation is contract knowledge and contract law. If you operate with that as your basis, you're always going to do well. So one other thing to remember about the buyer's agency agreement is it is very easy to cancel. Okay. If someone comes up to me and says, hey, I'm working with a buyer and I want to cancel, I'm probably going to call you. I'm not probably going to call you. I am going to call you and find out, hey, what's the story on this person? And unless you have a really great story on how that buyer's trying to, pull the wool over our eyes, we're probably going to allow them to get out of their buyer's agency agreement, because our culture and my belief, culture notwithstanding, is that real estate is made by people wanting to work together. And you want your clients to want to work with you. If they do not want to work with you, we don't want to force the issue. Now, if they don't want to work with you because their cousin just got their license and they want to put money in their pocket instead, that's a completely different story. But I'm talking about you not fulfilling that client's needs. And sometimes that can mean any number of different things. But the reason why I bring this up is it is very easy to get out of this agreement, and people oftentimes will use it as leverage. And one of the situations that I've seen come up is buyers agents will have their buyers sign an agency agreement, and then they kind of stop talking to their buyers. They maybe set up a search on the MLS or something like that, and they quit talking to them. They're no longer available for them. So after your buyer consult, you talk to them, you set expectations, you give them the flow and the process, then you begin the buying process. And the buying process set, what your obligations are in that buying process. There's a couple of them. Number one, You always want to set up a search. Set up a search for every buyer. I mean, I can't even think of a reason why you wouldn't set up a search for them in the MLS. What does that do? It ties you to that customer. You become their source of new listings and listing information, not Zillow, not Realtor. You set up the KW app for them so that they can, you know, you're strengthening that technological bind to that client so that they are bound to you and they need you. So set up a search, figure out the best way, whether it's the app or the MLS, whatever, to keep you bound to that client. The other thing that it does is it keeps you in constant contact with that client. That client's getting emails from you. They're getting notifications from you. Hey, here's another listing. Here's yet another listing. Here's even another listing. So your client's like, wow, my buyer's agent's all over it. They're sending me all kinds of inventory. So set up a search. Stay in contact. Your search is going to do that for you, but you've got to call your clients. You've got to email them occasionally. Hey, how's it going? I hadn't heard from you in a couple of weeks. I know you're still looking at the MLS because I can see your activity. What's going on? Stay in contact with them. And the other thing is be available. Be available to your client. If your client is going to buy a house through you and they can't reach you, man, you're in trouble. I'm going to probably be getting a call from that buyer. Hey, I don't want to work with Babette. I'm picking on you today. Babette, I don't want to work with Babette anymore because she never returns my calls. Well, I don't have to. I got a buyer's agency agreement. That client's stuck to me. That's not going to work, guys, and it's not playing the long game. So make sure you're available. I'm going to go back real quick to the buyer's agency agreement. I said there's kind of a couple different a couple things that differentiate exclusive, non-exclusive. One is the commission piece of it. I like the non-exclusive because it's easy. You just check the box that says, I'm going to get paid based on whatever the MLS pays. So that piece of it's easy. The other piece is not as good, and that is the exclusivity of it. As an exclusive buyer's agent, you represent that buyer for the description of that property, and they can't rely on another agent to represent them. A non-exclusive agency agreement. Now you can get one of these if your buyer absolutely just is like, well, I don't want to be tied to just you. Okay, well, fantastic. Let me get a non-exclusive buyer's agency agreement. That way, at least you understand agency. I'm representing you, and you can be. I'm not the only agent that can represent you. So if you have so for me, I don't try to always tie it back to me, but since I don't get an exclusive buyer's agency agreement right from first contact, sometimes I'll get it in the middle of the deal. Sometimes, I never get it after the contract. Most oftentimes, I'll get a non-exclusive, and I'll just say, hey, I'm going to send you an offer, and I'm sending you my buyer's agency agreement that just tells you that I'm getting paid from the seller. I'm not collecting any money from you, and it's the agency issues that we talked about earlier. It's very, very simple. And it's an easier document. It's less pages. It's easier to swallow. So you can use that. I would urge you to use an exclusive buyer's agency agreement because it ties you to that client. More importantly, it ties that client back to you. So you can, if you get to the point where you have a really good rapport with your people and you're not filling out a buyer's agency agreement until you write a contract, the non-exclusive is a little bit easier. So that's kind of the difference between those two. Any questions on those before we kind of move along here?
Good
Okay.
question here,
Yeah.
Ketan here.
Ketan!
How's it going?
Good.
I have had some experiences, guys. Some experiences that I'd love to share, and Jody and me have got on a call a few times. But quick question: so, what if you're on the flip side of that? Somebody reaches out to you, and then you find out that they're working with another realtor. They haven't signed the buyer agency, but that realtor has set up a automated email for them. Mm-hmm. Where do you draw the line on that one? Do you still help them out? I have $1 million investment buyer wants to buy some acreage, but somebody else has been sending them some things, but they have not signed an agreement. And the first thing I said, I'm going to need an agreement. And since then, he has not responded back to me. I haven't done my lead follow-up in the last couple of weeks, but just saying, what's your thought?
Yeah. And that's, I'm not going to say great question after every question, but that's a great question. I'm sorry, I'm trying to fiddle with my screen here while I'm talking this. So on, a situation like that, what I will tell you that my belief and what I would recommend is that anytime someone, someone that you want to represent has been working with another agent prior to or even during, the minute you find that out, I think you've got to, we're professionals here and we're doing one heck of a good job for our clients. And, I had a conversation with an agent today that has an issue with a contract. And I was like, hey, listen, this is real estate. Sometimes you're going to have to ask tough questions. You're going to have to ask pointed questions. You're going to have ask questions that make you feel uncomfortable, But, I would ask that person, hey, what is the nature of your relationship with this other agent? That's the first question I would ask. And if they say, so, and there's all kinds of different situations, Kathan, but I will tell you that there's an agent over at Lindsay named Scott Miller. Okay. Scott Miller is a good friend of mine. And the fact that he's a good friend of mine makes no difference. But a person came to me and said, hey, we want to work with you and whatever. And they said, and I said, okay, the first thing I asked, the minute someone says we want to work with you, are you working with another agent? If they call me on a listing, the first thing I ask them is, are you working with another agent? Are you working with another agent? And if they say, well, no, and they're kind of puzzled. I go, well, fantastic. I said, look, one thing I never want to do is step on another agent's toes. And it gives you an anecdote as to why you're asking that question. And if they reply no, if they reply yes, and you say, well, you can say the same thing. Well, here's the thing. I never want to step on another agent's toes. So I need can you tell me what the nature of your relationship with that agent is? And most of the time you're going to get a good answer. And when I say good, I mean a valid answer. Well, gosh, Kathan, we signed an agency agreement with them and, okay. So your relationship is they're your agent, or they might say, well, they showed us houses. They've driven us around quite a bit. But we didn't sign anything. Either way, I'll tell you, when I deal with Scott Miller, someone said, well, this guy named Scott has showed us some houses over at Lindsay. And I said, okay, there's a couple things we need to do here. Number one, I have a relationship with this agent, but I think that if you want to work with me, I would like to work with you, but you have to let that other agent know. And more importantly, depending on the situation, depending on what they had done, I might reach out to the agent and say, hey, look, your client has contacted me. They've expressed an interest in working with me. They've informed me that they have no agency relationship with you. So I wanted to, person to person, let you know that, these people they're going to work with me and they've agreed to enter into an exclusive buyer agency agreement or whatever. Most of the time it's going to be better for the client to terminate whatever level of relationship they have. Now, I think it's always better to officially terminate any relationship, regardless of how unofficial it is. That's my advice. That's what I do. I think that if you're in this, regardless of how long you're in this business for, you need to operate of the long game mindset. Even if you get out of the business in a year, you need to operate in the long game mindset. And I will tell you that playing the long game, one client is not going to mean anything over the long game, over the long haul. So don't be willing to sacrifice your integrity or your protocol, whatever you do, just because it's one client. So for your client, Kathan, in particular, do you know what the agency relationship is? Do you know what the nature of the agency relationship is? Have you discussed that at all? Oh, you're muted.
I did, and the other agent had helped them sell their investment property just recently. So that's their relationship, and that other agent had done property management for them. So that's okay. That's the relationship there.
Okay, so they have an not related to the transaction that you're going to do. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so did they express that they want to work with you exclusively?
Yeah, they'll be happy to sign an agreement with me. I said, the way I work is I want an agreement. That way we know this relationship is firm and there's not a opportunity there. And I'm happy to call the other agent, but you tell me what. So I didn't know where to draw the line. I'm going to have to consult my broker, and I just have been really busy and have not had a chance. But this is a great opportunity to ask you right here.
Yeah, yeah, and also the reason why I wanted to bring this out is because these situations are great for people to learn. But for me, I wouldn't be necessarily compelled to call that agent. But that agent has a previous relationship with these people, and a lot of times people think by proxy they own that client for life, whether they're buying and selling, residential, commercial, whatever, and they don't necessarily. So for me, my advice would be, hey, I'm going to work my can off to be your exclusive buyer's agent. Here's this agreement, and let's sign this. And don't worry about that other agent. I mean, ultimately, I think that they're going to get the picture. The buyer knows that you're their huckleberry. So just make sure that you do everything in your power that doesn't give that other agent a leg up. Like don't get lax and quit sending them inventory. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, we got this property from our other, this other person had been sending us stuff and you never sent this. Why didn't you send it? So you may have to stay on top of them. But if they're willing to go into an agreement with you, I mean, you could call the other agent or email them or something and just say, hey, look, I just wanted you to know that I have an exclusive buyer's agency on this person. I know you've contacted them, and I just wanted you to make you aware that they were working with me. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all you have to do. If that agent is a person of honor, they're going to automatically cease, communications and stuff like that. And you don't have to say, hey, quit sending my client stuff. Just say, hey, I just want to, in full disclosure, I want to let you know that I'm representing this client. But that's as far as I would take it, and you don't even have to. Okay, I'm getting a nod, so yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So the next thing, so let's what have we done? We've had our initial buyer consult. We've explained to them the buying process, and we're engaging in the buying process. We're setting up searches for them. We've stayed in contact with them. We're available to them. We're showing them property. We've got an agency agreement with this person, whether it's heavily implied or more importantly, and hopefully we have an agreement with them. They're our client and we're their agent. So the next step really gets into the offer piece of it. But before we do that, there is one thing that I would recommend you doing, and that is part of this process. It doesn't really fall on us because it's out of our lane, if you will. But I think it's something that you should do is make sure that your client is a buyer. What I mean by that is get them pre-qualified. At least, unless you absolutely know they're a savvy buyer. Let them know what the process is. Hey, here's what's going to happen. Your banker is going to ask for, 2 months of bank statements. They're going to ask for 2 years of tax returns, so be prepared for that. Have you done that yet or whatever? I'm fortunate that a lot of my clients, I know them or I know them by proxy and I know they're qualified. So I don't really go through this process, but what I'll do is I'll backdoor that question. I'll say, hey, look, I'm sure you guys don't have any issues, but I have a bunch of lenders that I work with and I don't have a dog in the hunt. So I'm prepared to give you several names and numbers from several different financial institutions, but have you got someone that you're working with, or can I help you kind of, in front of you? That's a great way to, segue into that. And, if they say, so we've got our lender, we got a lender and we're okay. Okay. Do you have any questions about the process? I don't know when the last time you bought a house is, but the lending process has changed a lot. they really want a lot of information from you. Are you good with that? You have any questions about that process? That's a good way to find out whether your clients have been, to the bank yet, or they know, and it's just a way to kind of check that box a little bit. However, if I'm dealing with a first-time home buyer, or I'm dealing with they may not be a first-time home buyer, they may have bought a property, but maybe I just don't know them very well, and I don't know if they're pre-qualified because they, I'll take a sign call. I'm not 100% by repeat referral, and I'd be like, have you gone to the bank yet? Have you gotten pre-qualified? Are you good there? And just it's really bad to write an offer on a house that your buyer can't buy. Man, it's stinking embarrassing. So, there's a couple ways to do that, but I would suggest in your process that you do some type of buyer qualification, whether that be asking if they've gone to the bank, asking them questions, to straight out asking them, are you pre-qualified? This house is $300,000. Now, did your bank qualify you for that much? Because I know the banks are tight now, or something, something like that. Okay, so that moves us to the old contract. Any questions on kind of what we've covered so far? Nothing? Okay. So I am representing my buyer. We have found us a house. We're excited, and we're going to sit down and we're going to write an offer. So let me pull this up here, guys. Our favorite thing to see is the contract. That means we know we're hopefully, or we're getting very close to getting paid. All right, your buyer's name's up here, and what I would recommend here is, this is really the most formal part of this process. It gets formal every time we put pen to paper, but the contract is certainly, in my mind, represents the most formal. So what I do, parties, and the reason why I would do this is, figure out who you're dealing with and what the title name is how they're gonna take title. Because if someone just put this in there, that's not right for me. In fact, the title company would probably, they're going to want a general addendum. So you're just creating more work if you don't get it right. So what I would do is I would do Joe David Hendricks and Jessica Hendrick. I'll go down here to the next line. Hendricks, a married couple. So that way they know we're married. Sometimes brothers, sisters, maybe two women or two men buy a house that are married. You need to let title know that they're married. They're probably going to ask you to create an addendum or something if you don't. So I would make sure, and I would actually put Ruth. She'll probably kill me because she knew I divulged her middle name, but I would put the first, middle, and last names exactly how they're going to take title every time, guys, every time. In addition to not having to do a general addendum for title, because they're going to say, well, this guy's name's not Jody, it's Joe. We need a general addendum saying the buyer is Joe. And some of you may have already had to do this, but it's just a pain. Go ahead and get the right names first. And then, single family detached with land, whatever type of property you're doing here. Street address goes here, legal description. I can't tell you how important yes. Kathy.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So I have been using the name that's appearing on their driver's license. Am I doing it correctly?
You cut out a little bit. What was that? I'm sorry.
So I have been asking them for how their names appear on their driver's licenses, and I put those names on the contract. Is that a good practice, or? Yeah,
that's absolutely good practice. Yeah, you're going to be right 99.9% of the time. Yeah, and the other thing too is it's if you ever forget someone's name, I'm like, hey, can I have your driver's license? I'm going to need your full legal name and address and everything. It's just easier for me to do it, and they pop their driver's license over or whatever, and then of course you're like, okay, William, and they're like, no, it's Bill, or whatever, but. Anyway, that's fine. Driver's license is going to suffice. 99% of the time. So, but put those full names up there. Put a married couple, especially if you're dealing with a same gender couple. If you don't, I'm telling you, title is going to make you do a general addendum. It's a whole nother piece of paper that you've got to get filled out and signed by buyers and sellers and everything else. Get the proper names here. So address here, legal description. Make sure that you know, if you don't have a good legal description or lot and block, that's another, you know, kind of thing for legal description. If it's in a subdivision, lot 2, block 1 of Candlewood subdivision, you know, something like that. You know, you can also put, this is a good one, house and 3.2 acres more or less, legal to be determined by title. Okay. Now, why would I do this? Anybody know? The reason why you do that
To protect yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you don't have a good legal description, and I've done this before and it saved my butt, because a house was listed twice in the MLS. My clients had originally looked at the original listing, which was a house plus 5 acres. Then they sent me the same house and said, hey, look, they had a price reduction. I think we really want to make an offer on this house. I didn't realize that they had listed the house again with less price. So I didn't even think to look. How would you think of that proactively? So in my offer, because I didn't go back and check the MLS, I typed in here house and 5 acres more or less legal to be determined by title. And they were like, you know, this offer is kind of low. You know, I think it was, I think our offer was around 750,000. I don't remember what it was. The original listing, because the 2 acres were really nice, was like 850. And I was like, well, you know, that's what they're offering, and I think it's actually pretty close to the list price. And they're like, well, no, we listed it again with only 3 acres. And that's what my client saw. And we had this big dust up over whether it was 3 or 5 acres or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, had I not written house and 5 acres legal to be determined, we could have been under contract and we could have got further down the road, and we had this big kerfuffle over, you know, which listing they were actually making an offer on. Was it the listing with 3 acres or was it the listing with 5 acres? So in lieu of having a legal description, right, what are you buying? I'm buying a house and a shop and what we think is 3 acres or 5 acres or 10 acres. If it's a duplex, I'm buying a duplex, both sides and land legal to be determined by title, so that they don't say, well, we're only selling half of the duplex. It's got a lot split right down the middle of the wall. I mean, I've seen stuff like that happen. It's kind of crazy. So if you've got some kind of weird deal, write the who and what that you're buying and put legal to be determined. And even a better way to do it, legal to be determined by title to buyer's satisfaction. Okay, that way you know that you're almost building in a contingency there. So if there's any ambiguity, that's the best way to handle that. Otherwise, just put in the legal description. Purchase price, obviously, financing. You know, what you choose here, guys, matters. Okay, if you choose that or that or that, does that diminish the value of your offer? Anybody want to take a guess on that?
Yes.
Yeah, it does. It does diminish your offer. And the reason being is that some of those, the funding on some of those programs like RD is uncertain. Okay. The other thing is an FHA and a VA appraiser, are they tougher than a normal appraiser, or are they about the same as another appraiser? They're tougher.
They're tougher.
Yeah. And you know, here's another thing. is they can actually require repairs to be made on the property. The appraiser can. So if you're in a multiple offer situation and you check FHA or VA and your buyer actually wants to go conventional, you basically have just done your client a disservice. So make sure you know what type of loan they're going to get, and try to get conventional if you can. But on a lot of this stuff, under a certain price point, you're going to get VA, FHA, or perhaps if the house is eligible, you might get RD. If it's an investment property, you might do to be determined by Signature Bank. Okay. That may be who they're going to or whatever. And I put that sometimes because we're not going to use conventional financing on an investment property. We're going to use in-house financing, and that's going to be predicated by the lender, and those stipulations are different from time to time. So make sure that you put the most accurate information that you can.
Hey, Jody,
Yep.
back to 2B, the full legal description. I was told also to put down the parcel number. Is that?
Yeah, that's that's a great catch. Yeah, absolutely put the parcel number in there. That's I usually do that. It escaped me right then. But yeah, the parcel number is great. The only thing is you gotta really make sure you got the right parcel number. And most of the time you will, but that can be a costly mistake.
The best way you get that is from the tax records, right? Or the
100%.
the website.
Yeah. And ACT, Data Scout, and Air County Data for Benton County. Those are the two best websites. Now they got mapping software, so it's pretty hard to screw up. But we had a situation where somewhat recently an agent was representing someone, and the additional lot conveyed, and they didn't put it right here. And, it was in the MLS, the lot conveys with acceptable offer, but they didn't put it in the contract. Well, that lot didn't convey because they didn't put the parcel number in there. And this new buyer shows up to their house and someone's mowing the lot next door. And they're like, "What are you doing mowing our lot?" And they're like, "Well, this is not your lot. This is my lot." And they're like, "What?" And man, it was a bad deal. So, pay particular attention to what you do here. So moving on, and we're, we got a little bit of a late start, so I'm going to have to kind of speed up here. So if they're having a VA loan or FHA loan, there's a couple disclosures. And I know that, you guys have covered this a little bit, perhaps in pre-licensure. The best thing you can do, guys, is read through these. Become familiar with the language. There's a few stipulations, and I'm not a lending expert. You're going to get more experience on VA and FHA from a lender than you can ever get from me. But again, just be as accurate as possible on these. I always check this, and I always make sure in my buyer's consult, or sometimes along the way, or I include it with the offer, that I get the FHA form for your protection, get a home inspection. But make that a habit of checking that and giving them. It's just hey, you're gonna get your house inspected. Agency, this is pretty straightforward. If it's a Keller Williams listing, you check C. If it's not, you check B. Okay. Now, let's say that you've got a for sale by owner deal, and neither party is represented by an agent, and the seller calls you and says, "Hey, I want you to write this contract up for me. This buyer's trying to buy my house," and you're not representing the buyer. You check that. That's not going to happen very often at all, but it does happen, and it probably happens in a market like we're in now more than ever, because people are able to sell their houses for sale by owner a little bit easier maybe than they could because of the decreased inventory. And they may ask you to step in and write a contract for a fee. But you don't want to represent both parties in that. If you're asked by the seller, you only want to represent the seller. And then, of course, lastly, kind of the for sale by owner. That's, if you're representing a buyer and there's no listing form. Non-representation, This would be if you're, just, you probably never use this, but you might broker a deal, for a flat fee and not collect anything from the buyer, or excuse me, not represent the buyer or the seller. There's additional documents, but this is 1 out of 1,000, guys. So I wouldn't even mess with that. If it does, we'll get on the phone and we'll figure it out. Closing costs. Specific language here I think that we've adopted. Seller to pay up to and not to exceed. I always like to put an amount, $5,000 of all of buyers' closing costs and prepaids. It's as simple as that, guys. That's all you need to put right there. I see a lot of folks that will language this to death. That's all that's necessary, and I would stay away from this. This whole percentage thing, you seller to pay up to not to exceed 3%. It'd be of the purchase price of all the buyer's closing costs. In here, know what the amount is, know what the buyer's closing costs. If you put 3% in there and the buyer says, well, gosh, we're only going to net, or excuse me, the seller says we're only going to net 97%. So we better mark our house up because they're wanting us to pay closing costs. And then you find out that their closing costs only equaled 2%. You just left some of the buyer's money on the table. So be careful of how you do this, but that's the best language to use. That's all the language you really need to use. Earnest money, unless the seller wants it, because we're representing the buyer, we're never going to offer up earnest money or non-refundable. The only time that I would do that is in the event of a multiple offer situation. And you got to be careful there, but certainly your chances of winning in a multiple offer situation are going to be increased if you do a non-refundable deposit. But I would take that as a case by case basis, and just again, be careful there. Unless your client's going to go through with it, then a non-refundable deposit can become very beneficial to you. Title requirements, guys, this is a little bit of a screw up, I think, and they'll probably change this in 2021. But most of the time, you're gonna do this. This is where you do a combination policy. This is probably, frankly, the most applicable for most contracts, because you're going to ask the seller to furnish the owner's policy and the buyer's responsible for the mortgagee's policy. What this does is this says, okay, we're going to try to go the cheap route and split a combo policy, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you typically need to close at the same title company. So a little bit of difference. Most of the time, I'm going to check B. That's the most applicable for the way that we do this. If everybody wants to close at the same title company, you can check this. That's fine. But that's the main difference. Closing at the same title company, not closing at the same title company. That's up to you. Survey. Okay, one thing we don't want to put here is seller to provide existing survey, or if applicable or whatever. My point is, in this particular contract, who are we representing? We're representing the buyer. You got to find out, guys, what your buyer wants. Do they want a survey? Is the contract contingent on a survey? If it's buyer to provide a survey if applicable, if your seller's just like, if they got a survey, just call the seller, call the listing agent, say, do you have a survey? Does your seller have a survey? Well, yes, they do. Actually, I meant to attach it to the MLS. Then don't put if applicable, say seller to provide existing survey, or get the survey prior to writing the contract. If they absolutely want a survey, you cannot check that. You need to check a new survey satisfactory to buyer, especially guys on land or a house with land, you almost always want to get a new survey, or the best thing is seller to have existing survey certified to buyer. That's the second best thing you can do. And what that does is it has the surveyor goes out there and makes sure that there's no new encumbrances or easements or encroachments or title defects or anything on there that could potentially trip you up. And your buyer then has their own survey, which then they can certify that to the seller, or they can give to their buyer down in the future. It's I would not buy a house with land or buy raw land without a survey, either certified to me or a new survey. Period. End of story. Full stop. I think that's the best policy. Okay, prorations, yada yada, furniture and fixtures and attached equipment. One thing you need to do is you need to first of all, stay away from this if you can. We're not in the furniture business. We're not in the washer and dryer business. We're not in the ride and lawnmower business. But people are going to want refrigerators. They're going to want washer and dryers or whatever. So I would make it a habit when you're dealing with your buyer. Are you is there any personal property that you absolutely can't live without? Make sure that they give you that list, and if not, leave it blank or put a dash there or something that you know that you intentionally left it blank. And if they do want something, please put it in there and please describe it to a T. I can't tell you. I mean, I'm dealing with an issue right now where it's a dual agency deal. So we represented both buyer and seller, washer and dryer to convey. Well, these people had a very, very, very nice washer and dryer. And the listing agent went over the contract. They're incredibly professional, went over the contract with the seller, and because the seller was traveling, and they explained the contract to him, and they forgot to tell him that the washer and dryer conveyed. Okay, they sign the contract, they get down to the nitty gritty, and the washer and dryer is no longer there, and they're like, oh my gosh, washer and dryer were supposed to convey. Turns out it's almost a $4,000 washer and dryer, which I didn't even know existed. So we looked back at the contract, and you know what it said? Washer and dryer to convey. It didn't say Whirlpool Duet washer and dryer currently in laundry room to convey. It just said washer and dryer to convey. So we got in a big dust up, but easy enough. We were able to buy a brand new washer and dryer for about half the cost of that other particular brand, and buyer and seller were happy. Now the agent paid for the washer and dryer out of their own pocket because their integrity level is so high. They're like, I would never ask my seller to pay for my mistake. But they could have been on the hook for $4,000 had the buyer's agent described it like they're supposed to. So make sure you describe personal property. Contingency, the only time I'd really use this is if they have to sell a property. Contingent, and I'm not going to spell it out for you, but contingent on the sale or
Hey, Jody.
Yeah.
I know you're running late, but for the sake of the audience, sometimes the seller and the buyer do negotiate the refrigerator and it's conveyed at no value. Could you help us understand what to write so that the mortgage company won't take offense on that?
Yeah. I would always put, typically, Kathan, that's a good question. I would put in there, washer and dryer in that furniture and fixtures piece. If it's more than that, I would always put it on a bill of sale. But I think it's most of the lenders, because lending has loosened up a little bit, most of them are okay if it's washer and dryer or refrigerator. If it's anything beyond that, I'd put it on a separate bill of sale. But I would just put in there refrigerator in kitchen. You might even put Frigidaire refrigerator in kitchen, or Sub-Zero refrigerator currently in kitchen. Again, we don't want any ambiguity. Sub-Zero refrigerator in kitchen and Whirlpool Duet washer and dryer currently in laundry room, convey from seller to buyer at closing at no value. That's it. That's as simple as possible. And any lender will accept that. Unless they don't want any personal property on the contract at all. And then you would just put it in a bill of sale between buyer and seller. But most of them now, I haven't seen any pushback on that in a while. Now, if you start getting lawnmowers and hot tubs in there, that becomes a completely different story. But the hot tubs are actually, they're probably a little more acceptable because they're a lot of times they're built into a deck or something like that. But it can be a little bit troublesome if you start going beyond things that are naturally in a house. So does that cover you? Okay. All right. So moving on, any more questions on fixtures and attached equipment? That can be kind of a doozy. I'll tell you one that gets us, and you need to, if you know, there's a couple of takeaways here. That word right there, that can get you, because it says in here, window and door coverings and related hardware. Okay. Window and door coverings and related hardware. Drapes. Some people are going to think that drapes are window and door coverings. Some people are not going to think that drapes are window and door coverings. So why leave it ambiguous? Drapes, guys, I don't own any drapes, but I know people who do. Drapes can be very, very expensive. The hardware that goes with draperies can be very, very expensive. Please be careful. Ask your buyers, what personal property are you expecting? And you might even bring up certain things. You might read that paragraph out loud. If there's any two paragraphs that you read, those are the two most important things in a contract. Well, they're not the two most important, but they're the two that get us in trouble the most time. Again, contingency, that's if someone's buying or selling a house. I would always do, if you put your contingency up here, I would always, if I'm representing a buyer, guys, which we are, every time, binding without escape clause. You may get some pushback on this from the listing agent. They may say, well, we want an escape clause because your house is not even on the MLS yet. But you may not, and if you get binding without escape clause, that means that house is yours. There's no way they can bump you out. They still can't bump you out if you do binding without or binding with, but theoretically, if your buyer can't remove that contingency, they can move on with another buyer. If you do binding without escape clause, they don't have that luxury, and your buyer is tied to that property until the contract either expires or they close. So as representing a buyer, always check binding without escape clause if there is a contingency. Home warranty plans, this is up to you and your buyer. But again, I think you have to be specific. One of the biggest things is provided by, you put your company here. And then I would do like an enhanced plan with HVAC and something like that. Okay. If you have extra items that you absolutely want to be covered, you have to put it in there, because there are now home warranty plans are going to include a swimming pool right off the bat. So you definitely want to make sure that everything that buyer that wants covered is covered. And that, as that we're talking about representing buyers here, we definitely want this stuff to be covered if that's what your buyer is expecting. Better to have pushback from the listing agent than to not put the proper coverage in there and your buyer ends up getting hosed. You are very, very, very rarely not going to check B here. Okay. Now B is a little bit goofy because it gives your buyer the right to walk away from a contract just about for any reason. And let me see where, well, I'll find it here in a second. So this is one of your most important things after writing an offer, is getting this done. the buyer has 10 business days. They can either inspect it personally or they can have a professional inspector come out and inspect it, which is 99 times out of 100 what happens. But this basically just sets your buyers up for the inspection and establishes a timeline. But it also allows the buyer, okay, here's the language. It also allows the buyer a pretty easy out. So, and we'll talk about this more when we cover the selling side, or the listing side rather, but if a buyer is not satisfied with a personal or professional inspection and elects to terminate this real estate contract, both buyer and seller agree to sign a termination of contract with buyer recovering the earnest money. Okay, let's talk about that for 2 seconds. Basically what that is saying is that if you're under contract, that buyer could go perform an inspection, and it doesn't say what kind of inspection. It just says an inspection. Legally, your buyer could drive by the house and say, we performed a visual inspection and we didn't like the look of it, so we're going to terminate. Your buyers have a lot of leverage here with that language, but I think part of setting expectations in your buyer consultation, and when you write this offer, is you have to tell that buyer that, hey, are you sure this is the house that you want? You know, now if they're going berserk over the house, you know, you don't have to ask that question. But what I'm seeing is a lot of terminations from buyers through buyer's remorse, or they put a house under contract and they changed their mind. That's really buyer's remorse, but they may change their mind because they saw another house that became available, or, you know, something happened, or they just changed their mind. Stuff. And your buyer has the ability to get out of that contract very easily, but we want to make sure that we're printing a contract that is worth the paper that it's printed on, and we're not dealing with a flaky buyer that's going to make you look bad. The last thing you want to do is terminate a contract because you didn't properly qualify your buyer. So make sure when your buyer's writing that contract that they understand the gravity of putting a house under contract, and don't use that as, oh, hey, you can always walk away in 10 days. I mean, we want to be exactly the opposite. Hey, you've got the opportunity to do all your due diligence, but let's make sure that this is the house that you want and that you're willing to move forward on it. Don't be the guy who writes the junky offer. I kid you not, guys. I've seen people write offers out there. Hey, let's just write an offer on it. Let's see if we can get it under contract. And, you know, if you end up liking the house, we'll move forward. And if you don't, we'll just tear up the contract. I mean, we actually terminated an agent for behavior like that. I mean, just, you know, writing contracts and just seeing if they would stick. And that is, I have a feeling that the AREC will change that contract language at some point, but that's just, we want to use that as a worst case scenario and an opportunity for your buyer to apply that leverage in the event that the house doesn't meet their requirements from a due diligence standpoint. But we don't want to use that as, hey, let's just write a house, you know, contract, and if you like it, then we'll end up buying it. That's a conversation you have before you write the contract. So
doesn't that kind of go with integrity and our integrity to our other colleagues?
It doesn't go to it. It defines it 100%. I mean, yeah, it's bigger than that. No, I mean, it does, but I'm just saying, I'm using your words. I'm just saying it's, you know, to me, it's so important, probably because I see so many agents that call me and say, man, I had this house under contract. We've had it off the contract, you know, we've had it under contract for 2 weeks and the buyer just flaked on us. And I'm like, oh, I mean, guys, here's the thing. It makes us look bad as listing agents for us to go under contract and for a buyer to just flake. Man, there's nothing worse than having to tell your clients that their buyers, you know, flying the coop on them. And we'll cover that more on the listing side. But as a buyer's agent, I think you just have to position the inspection as due diligence. This is not the time to figure out whether you want to buy a house or not. You figure that out before you write the contract. But yes, it absolutely speaks to integrity and professionalism. And frankly, you could file if you caught somebody doing that, it would probably never stick. But I mean, we just want to we're trying to avoid that scenario as best that we can. And you're right. It absolutely speaks to professionalism and integrity at the highest level. That's why as buyer's agents, we never want to lead with that. That's our last way out if we have to get out. It's not, oh, hey, we're not serious about this contract. So that's probably the most important piece of that inspection language right there. But that establishes our timeline. Also, you just, in the event that buyer doesn't make the necessary inspections in the allotted 10 days, buyer automatically waives their right to reinspection. So they can't go in there and claim that, oh, well, hey, this was broken when we bought the house. We expected that to be fixed. If they don't tender an IRSA, they're hosed. So this is, one of the biggest timelines. It is the biggest timeline that you have to adhere to, other than making the close date.
Does COVID have any flexibility in that?
That's a great question too. It does, but only if there's special COVID language attached to the contract, which that has been provided by the REC. But I will tell you, Jeremy, I'm not seeing that language used at all. Nobody's using COVID language. I mean, I've not seen it on a contract hardly at all. I mean, it's just, there's enough, ways for a buyer to get out of a contract. The COVID language would really help a seller rather than a buyer, but because it would allow the seller to get out of a contract. And the way our contracts are structured, the seller is locked in from day one. So yes, if you have concerns with COVID, you can insert that provided COVID language into the contract.
I've been putting the clause in all my contracts.
Yeah. Okay.
But,
Well,
what I was running into was a good inspector was not going to be available for 9 business days on this contract I have coming up, which was pushing it. But with Labor Day coming up on Monday, that gave us 1 extra day.
Yeah. And here's what I would do, and that's also a great point. But if you think you're not going to make that timeline, put it in the contract or do a general addendum, IRSA due date to be extended until September 8th or whatever. That's the best way to handle a slow IRSA. I would stay away from the COVID language. Actually, you don't really have to that much as a buyer, but the only thing is if you insert it as a buyer, it also transfers to the seller, and you're giving the seller an opportunity to extend the close date and potentially get out of the contract. So me personally, I don't like the COVID language. I think it opens up. Yeah, I think it opens up too many pitfalls. And just use a general addendum to extend the IRSA due date. That's the easiest way. And it's, and I would use that exact language, IRSA due date to be September 8th or whatever. And that way you're not circumventing any, other items in that contract. Does that make sense?
I was thinking the same thing, that I shouldn't insert it, but, just talking and being coached through by other agents, and they're like, yeah, just insert it here on this paragraph. But I'm like, this kind of opens up a lot of things now.
Oh yeah, you bet it does. It's it's actually not good. So I would kind of stay away from it. I know we're already a little bit overdue, and I don't want to prevent anybody from asking questions, because that's important to know. But for me, representing buyer or seller, my advice is to avoid COVID language. However, if you have a buyer or seller that is asking questions about it and you want to know, again, I'm as quick as a phone call or a text. So please let me know, and we'll talk through a situation as it comes up. Hang on, guys. I'm going to yell at my kids and tell them to, hey, guys, can y'all hold it down a little bit? Thank you. So anyway, again, I would read through some of these just so you're familiar with the language. They're not, this is, with regards to appraisals and some other, if they were going to levy repairs on your property, you're always going to get a disclosure. Either you have one that's in the MLS and you've already filled it out and you know the day and date of it, or you're going to ask that they provide a written disclosure a new one because you don't have access to it. But you guys, you got to get a disclosure and get it done quickly. Either if it's in the MLS, go ahead and get it, make that a habit. And if they don't have one, get one and have them sign it when they sign the contract. The seller's property disclosure is a brutally important piece of the puzzle. So make sure that you get that from the listing agent and you get it signed as quickly as possible. You're always going to get a termite. You know, this lead-based paste is easy. That's if it was built recently. That's if it was built prior to 1978. If it's built prior to 1978, you'll have to get a lead-based paint disclosure. No big deal. It's in the form Simplicity. They have to get their insurance. Closing date, I would always make sure that you've got plenty of time to close. And, you know, a lot of people always default to the last day of the month. Guys, I wouldn't do that because last day of the month, title companies get really busy. Moving companies get really busy. Everybody's busy because that's a default. I would pick maybe, you know, the week before or the next day or whatever, but don't always default to the last day of the month. And it just makes it tougher. Possession upon closing, that's going to be your go-to. Delayed possession and early possession, we'll talk about that more in part 3, where we're just talking about specific forms. Risk of loss, you know, the seller's responsible for that house all the way up to the close date. That's important to know because we just had a hailstorm that creamed a bunch of houses. Okay, guys, buyer's disclaimer of reliance. I'm going to let you read that at your leisure, but I will tell you why that is so important. Basically, what the biggest thing about the buyer's disclaimer of reliance is it indemnifies you as a buyer's agent. It indemnifies the brokerage. It indemnifies also the listing agent, and it indemnifies the listing brokerage. It indemnifies everybody. And basically it says, hey, you as a buyer, you are disclaiming any reliance on any third-party information. And that's so important to know because when you're representing a buyer, I would read that to them. Again, if that's any one paragraph that you read, because it's putting all of the responsibility on the buyer, and the buyer needs to know that. If they know that going in, you're setting the proper expectation, number one, but number two, you're avoiding yourself a lot of headaches that after they close and they say, well, my sprinkler system doesn't work or whatever. Guys, that they had their chance to do their due diligence. They are not relying on any representations or warranties or anything. I mean, it basically says that if they close on that property, the only thing they can rely on is, does anybody want to take a guess? What's the only thing a buyer can rely on after the property closes? Source of information. Seller's property disclosure. That's why the SPD is so important. But if I was going to read any 2 paragraphs, it would be the personal property part and the buyer's disclaimer of reliance. And I would call it a day. The next one I would read is the inspection paragraph. But know your talking points. Know that contract backwards and forwards. And let's open it up for questions real quick. I apologize. I ran a little bit long. I urge you to come to the seller's piece because we'll look at this things kind of in reverse, and it'll give us an opportunity to see why certain things are important why it's important to check binding without escape clause for a buyer. But as a seller, you want to check binding with escape clause. Some of those point of views are completely different. And we'll also get through the inspection process, and we'll frame that up for buyer and seller in the next items, because I did get cut a little bit short today, and I'll practice on shortening this up. Any questions?
All of these forms are ones that are gotten whenever we get on the MLS, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're in form Simplicity to be specific. But when you log into Clarity, you've got those icons, MLS, form Simplicity, whatever. But yes, everything that you'll ever need, with the exception of a bill of sale, is in form Simplicity, 100%.
And then and I'm sorry that I'm asking this question. I haven't gotten my MLS listing yet. I'm still waiting for my license to come back from the state. So
Yeah.
this is all new still. But now, just curious, whenever you do those, does it automatically come up into Command, or do you have to upload them into Command?
Well, like when you're writing a contract or whatever.
Yeah.
So, to be honest with you, I don't know how exactly or if Form Simplicity interacts with Command. I don't believe it does. I operate 100% through Form Simplicity and Clarity, where you'll log in for your MLS and for your forms. I operate exclusively out of that site. It's set up for e-signatures and everything else. It also hosts all of your transactions so that you can go back to a transaction. And, after you fill out a contract, it's going to be probably a couple of weeks before you do an IRSA, but you go back to your transaction, pick that transaction, add that form to the transaction. It automatically self-populates. It's pretty intuitive. It's pretty user-friendly, but I operate. So I don't see how it could operate through Command. Ultimately, what I have to do is save those forms when they're completed and then just download them into Command. What else? Any other questions?
When is the next course?
So it's the first and third Wednesday of every month. And again, I've changed and I apologize, guys. We had a little bit of technical difficulty getting on at first. I'll have that ironed out next Wednesday, or Wednesday after next, and also I'll focus on getting the material for condensed a little bit so that we don't leave any ends open or we don't run short on time. But yeah, it's and it may be tough to look at a transaction from tip to toe from a buyer or seller's perspective in 90 minutes. It's difficult, especially when you want to keep it open so that people can ask questions and stuff like that. It's a lot of material, but I'm trying to make it so that you can see it through the eyes of your buyer and seller, because to me, that's the most applicable, especially if you're brand spanking new. How do I write an offer for a buyer? That's exactly what I'm trying to achieve here. It's just hard to do in 90 minutes, and I'm talking fast too. So I'm doing the best I can, but first and third Wednesday of every month. And now that we'll start posting up the agenda a little bit, earlier, so you'll know exactly, well, hey, I've done that, but I want to do that again, or I've done that, I want to stay away from that. So we'll try to make it easier for you to know what's being taught and when.
Hey,
what else?
Jody,
Any other questions? What's that?
Hey, Jody, this is Ketan. Just want to thank you. I have written a few contracts. I got my license in January. I've closed a few deals. But like every one of these sessions, I pick up on some things, and I've taken so many notes this afternoon. So just want to say thank you.
I really appreciate that. And I will tell you guys, especially, if you're new or newer, I say this a lot, and the difference between a good agent and a great agent can be as simple as two things. And that's an encyclopedic knowledge of contracts and great communication. If you know your contracts backwards and forwards and you communicate effectively, 99 times out of 100, you're going to be the best agent in a transaction. And that should be your goal. You should always operate from being the better, more professional, more knowledgeable agent in any transaction. And it's not a competition, but what I'm saying is would you rather be on your toes or would you rather be on your heels? Me, I'd rather be on my toes. I'd rather be the one driving the transaction, knowing that I'm making the right decisions and I'm providing the best information and the best procedures for my client. And that's easy to do, guys. It's easy to get this high level of knowledge in contracts, and communication is really easy. Be available, answer your phone, return phone calls, return texts, that kind of thing. If you do those two things, that's going to pave. You still have to get clients, but that's going to pave the way to greatness. I mean and it's going to assure you that you have the upper hand in any transaction. I mean, I'm telling you, I see it in the transactions that we run into issues when you know your contracts and you communicate effectively. You're gonna have the upper hand every time in a transaction. And again, it's not about a competition, but why would you not want to have the upper hand? So I appreciate that, Kathan. I know you've been in here a lot, man, and I'm so glad that you're taking the opportunity to become an expert, because that's going to give you more business, man. You know those contracts backwards and forwards. You're going to blow your clients away, and that's what leads to repeat and referral business. Sorry. Okay. Anything else, guys?
Hey, Jody. I know
Thanks so much, Jody.
Oh,
Thank
bet.
you.
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody.
Someone have something else? Was there one person left?
Yeah, Jody. I noticed these are recording. Is there anywhere we can go and get these recordings?
Yeah, there is. I'll get with Jen. I don't know if she's still on here. But yeah, we can figure that out. But what I will tell you is that because I tried to approach this one a little bit differently, I will tell you in October, I'll be a lot better at it because I'll have my timing down. And I'll be able to spend a little bit more time on the stuff that I want to spend. But I'll see how you can find this recording, and we'll make sure that you've got access to it if you need it.
I appreciate it.
You bet. What else, guys? Anything else? All right. I thank you so much. I hope to see you guys in 2 weeks from today, and I'll be early. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.